In the previous video covering the system requirements for ARC Raiders, I made some statements with regards to the computation power needed by a GPU to be able to play the game. And while that metric was more of a ballpark estimation, I was curious to see how some of the weakest GPUs that come close to it perform in this game. The choice of GPUs to test, however, is going to be a bit more unusual, mostly because the floating point performance number alone is not enough. You also need to have 3 if not 4 GB of VRAM available. So I went for integrated graphics this time around. What used to be called the RX Vega 7, now called Radeon Graphics 448 SP, and that can be found with both Ryzen 5 4600G and 5600G. The 448 SP part stands for 448 shader processors, and they run at 1900 MHz. The Radeon Vega 11, found on the Ryzen 5 2400G and 3400G, using 704 shader processors, but at a much lower frequency of 1240 MHz, and the Radeon Vega 8 that comes with the Ryzen 5 3200G. This last IGPU has 512 shaders running at 1250 MHz in this instance. We'll talk more of these specs in the conclusion. For the test system, I used a custom build PC using 32 GB of DDR4 running at 300 MHz in dual channel. Now, because the IGPUs have access to the whole system memory, we can test for all 3 resolutions I typically go for: Full HD, 900p and 720p, but we will stick to low settings. At 1080 resolution, none of the GPUs manage to stay above 30 FPS all of the time, to paraphrase one of the creators that I follow. The IGPU of the Ryzen 3 3200G gets the worst average at 25 FPS. The Vega 11 IGPU powering the 2400G gets 2 more FPS on average, leaving the Vega 7 from the 4600G as leader with 29 FPS on average. But despite these results, I did find myself tempted to run the game at this resolution. This is probably due to the 1% lows being close enough to the average, with the 4600G's IGPU delivering the best experience. Don't get me wrong, the input latency was quite horrendous, but it was predictable. This gave me the feeling of being somewhat in control of the game. 1600 by 900 makes this feeling even more pronounced as the FPS improves. Interestingly enough, the IGPUs of the 3200G and 2400G seem to gain more in the average frame rate, with the 1% lows increasing by no more than 2 FPS. The game fell best on the 4600G's IGPU, with an average FPS of 37. The 2400G and 3200G got only 29 FPS. The 1% loss is also better on the 4600G at 29 FPS compared to around 20 FPS for the other 2 APUs. I take that as an effect of the higher clock for the IGPU, but we'll touch more on this in the conclusions. However consistent the latency is, I can see how a lot of us, me included, would like to get that to an even lower value. 1280 by 720 will do just that. The Vega 7 IGPU, found in the Ryzen 5 4600G, manages an average of 46 FPS, with 1% loss at 29. I was hoping for an increase in this percentile metric, but it was not meant to be. The other 2 APUs manage an average FPS in the mid-30s, with 1% loss in the low 20s at best. Would I play the game like this? Yes, gameplay usually matters more for me than graphics. Still, out of the 3, the 4600G's IGPU provided the best experience. Now about those numbers, the 7 from RX Vega 7 or the 11 from the Radeon Vega 11, those will tell you how many compute units the IGPU has. And since each CU has 64 shaders, the RX Vega 7 ends up with 448 shaders, Vega 11 has 704, and Vega 8 512. So how come that the RX Vega 7, having a lower number of shaders, managed to outperform the Radeon Vega 11? Well, the 4600G runs the IGPU at 1900 MHz, compared to the 1250 MHz for the 2400G. This is how the 448 shaders managed a similar performance as the 704 used by the Ryzen 5 2400G at lower frequency. Also, the higher frequency means that while both Vega 7 and Vega 11 have the same number of ROPs, the Vega 7 has a higher pixel rate, and it is this metric that made the difference between the two. In total vacuum, I'd say that the IGPUs managed to run the game just fine, so people who rely on one can safely buy ARC Raiders. And you can call me an APU hater for as long as you want, but used GPUs will run a lot better, and the GTX 1050 Ti is the best example of this. There are also a few older GPUs that I want to test in this game. Keep an eye on the channel if you're interested in that. As for this one, we're done. Thanks for watching, I hope you liked it, and I'll see you